opinions expressed. User bears full responsibility for their reliance on such content, information, or opinions.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Caregiver Solution Info Show. I'm your host, Marcia Teal, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. Actually, this is the first time in our new digs here, and I'm so glad that you're here to join us in our new look. I'm also glad that you're here because we have a wonderful guest today. And as a caregiver, if you're a caregiver, and that is a hard thing to be, you understand a lot about how difficult it is to take care of not only the person you're caring for, but how to take care of yourself, in addition to all the responsibilities you have, not just for yourself, but for the other person who can't take care of things for themselves, especially if they're dealing with memory loss, some form of dementia like Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia. And as a caregiver, we don't really know what to expect. So it's one of those jobs, and yes, it is a job. So if you think you don't work, think again. You might not get paid for it, but it is a job. And as having this difficult job, one that you've never really had training for, one that you never went to school for or university for, it's really hard because you don't know what to expect, and you're expected to perform well, at least in your mind. And it is something that every caregiver struggles with, some more than others. And so as a caregiver, you might be wondering, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? How do I know even what to do? How come I feel stupid? How come I feel crazy? How come I feel overwhelmed or stressed out? Should I be feeling this way? How should I even feel? There are so many questions that caregivers ask, and honestly, who can answer those questions for you? It can't be your adult children, because most times they live away from you, not in the same household, not in the same town, or sometimes not even the same state. So they don't understand your situation. You can't really ask your neighbors because they're not dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. And maybe they have had some experience with their husband's cousin's mother, but does that really relate to what you're doing, right? So who can you ask? Where can you go for help? The answers are out there. And the first thing you have to know is to ask for help. And it's okay to ask for help. And there are people to help you. And yes, you can read books. And yes, you can go to support groups. But sometimes you just need a person, your person, that can sit down with you, listen to you, and help you untangle all of these thoughts and feelings that you have, and to give you hope, and to give you some great advice, and kind of share with you how you're doing. And so today we have just that person, and it's so exciting that she is here today to join me here in the studio. Her name is Lisa Salcedo, and she is a licensed clinical social worker. She has been doing this for many, many years. I met her about 12 years ago. We had an opportunity to work together, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm so excited she's here because we're going to be talking about how a social worker, how a clinical licensed social worker, psychotherapist, counselor, whatever you call it, can be of help to you. And she's here joining me just for that reason. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
so
you.
great to see you after these years.
It's so great to see you too. It's been, what, 12 years maybe that we actually met and started working together. And we connected kind of serendipitously.
Exactly.
Love that word. And here we are, right?
Yes.
And so when I met you, you were doing a project. You came to Arden Courts of Delray Beach, and you had, I guess, like a thesis or something you were working on. And tell me about that.
So we actually came as a little team of graduate students to Arden Courts to provide Sand-Tray therapy and reminiscence type therapy groups to the dementia patients at Arden Courts. And we would come in as a team. Literally, there was 4 of us or so that would come every week for about, I don't know, I think it was about 10 months. And we helped the patients connect with memories and process feelings through the Sand-Tray and through the reminiscence groups, and it was so much fun.
Well, you know, I know that they loved you all being there, the residents, and I know you all loved being there with them, and
Yes,
it was
we
a
did.
great cohesive connection. And so I want to talk a little bit right off the bat, because you mentioned sand therapy, sand play therapy, and a lot of people might not know what that is. And you, as a licensed social worker and you know, being in the field and working with lots of different types of clients. I know one of them that you work with are caregivers and caregivers of people that have dementia. But you came in to work with the actual person that's suffering with dementia. And you have what you called Sand-Tray therapy. So explain what that is and how that could help somebody that has memory loss.
Sure. Thank you for asking that. It's such a great question. I love doing Sand-Tray therapy. And what it is, it's really a powerful intervention or a tool that we use to help clients express feelings, process fears, worries, traumatic experiences. And what we do is we bring, actually we had sort of like a mobile unit when we used to come to Arden Courts. We'd come with like lasagna pans, the size of like little foil lasagna pans, and we'd bring sand, and I'd fill each one of the lasagna pans up with about 2 inches of sand. And then we came in with drawers and drawers, trays of what we call miniatures. They're little toys, little people toys, vehicles, landscaping, any
Little houses. Little
yeah.
animals, right?
So much fun, yes. And each client would have a tray sitting in front of them with the sand in it, and then they would choose out of the trays. They would choose their little miniatures to create a little world or create a little scene. And we as the therapists, we would witness and just sit by them while they created a little scene in their tray. And then we would ask them afterwards, what's going on here? What did you do here? What did you create? And the stories that would come out of the clients' mouths were absolutely incredible.
Is that right? Can you recall any of the things that they told you, and were they able to really connect with memories through that and then express those memories?
100%. So two stories. One was my favorite gentleman. Every week he created a tray full of vehicles. Oh, you'd see ambulance cars and police cars and motorcycles, and every time, every tray would have a bridge in the middle of the tray. So in the middle of the scene of all of these vehicles would be a bridge, and we would always talk about the bridge and the vehicles, of course, but the bridge he named the bridge every time. So sometimes the bridge would be a bridge to nowhere, or the bridge over troubled water, or whatever it was. And we felt like over time he was processing his transition and his acceptance to his imminent death. Because bridges always they're symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism going on with the trays. And so the bridges were very symbolic of, communication or a trip going from one place to another.
Interesting.
It was interesting. And then another gentleman, in talking about connecting with memories, he put one figurine in the middle of his tray. It was a man and a woman. They looked like a wedding figurine. It was, they looked like they were dressed like that. And he told the story about how he was dancing with his daughter at her wedding.
Aww.
And he really connected with the memory, and he started to tear up. And it was so beautiful. And what ends up happening, what's so cool about working with Sandtray and those memories is one memory begets another. So they're connected. So Sandtray can help them connect with some good memories, maybe some sad memories too, but hopefully more of the good memories. And yeah, it helps them come back to earth, to this time
so you
frame.
were these exercises with the sand tray, you were eliciting memories, right? Which, like you say, brings them back, not really into our world now, because with the memories and they can't learn new memories, but they're connecting with their world when they remembered it, right? And that's therapeutic for them.
Yes, it is. They can process memories, traumatic memories. They can process feelings, current feelings of maybe worries or fears or things like that. And yeah, it's a very powerful tool. It's a little bit underused, maybe understated, but I loved working with the Sandtray. I worked with bereaved children. I worked with any and all kind of children, troubled children, but the adults, that work was really special.
And you know what's interesting, what comes to mind, especially when you mentioned working with children, because sometimes working with children in that way brings out feelings or information that maybe they wouldn't feel safe about sharing otherwise, right? About when they've been traumatized and they go to the police and they try to figure out what happened. But with people with memory loss and dementia, as you know, they sometimes lose their filter where they hold things in. Like a normal person, might not want to tell you everything because they don't want to share. They know better than to say certain things because of social attitudes and things like that. But people that have lost a lot of memory have also lost that filter where they don't hold back anymore, right? And so you've probably seen instances where they're telling something or sharing something of a memory that maybe they've kept in their mind all these years, kept inside, never shared, and now it's sort of like an outlet for them because they feel free because they're not inhibited, and the dementia allows them to feel free to do that.
Yes, exactly. And also conversely, like if somebody has difficulty expressing, so maybe they have difficulty verbalizing.
Yes.
Sandtray therapy is like perfect for them because it really does help with that expression of feelings. And it helps the aging population sometimes dig deeper. Like I think that's what you were alluding to. Sometimes those memories that are back in the recesses of their mind really, or in the back of their heart, so to speak. Yeah, it's powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and they are a caregiver and maybe they have someone who's, mild to moderate dementia who can still, follow directions and still verbalize, and they're looking for something to do with their loved ones, some kind of interaction. Would this be something that a caregiver could do at home and just interact with their person just to talk about things? I know a lot of times they say look at old pictures and things, but this is a little bit of a sideline to that, right? Because it's creating memories that they're creating, not looking at pictures.
I think yes. The short answer to your question is yes. The thing is, though, if they needed like supplies, right? So you need like little figures. So if you have some toys for the grandkids or toys for the kids lying around and there's superheroes or vehicles, and that would be really fun. Plus, it's really fun to play in the sand. The sand can be really calming and healing, and it's generally really cool. So maybe you just have coins and gemstones or something like that, or certain rocks.
And go digging for treasure like you're at the
Shells.
beach, right?
Exactly, yes. I think it would be awesome to use that.
Yeah, that's just a great idea for every caregiver of something new to do, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's no answers. It's whatever happens, and I think that would be a good way for caregivers to connect.
Yeah, I think so too. There's no rules.
Yes.
Just have fun.
No rules, have fun. That's the rule, have fun.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more from Lisa Salcedo about therapy for not only the person with dementia, but for the caregiver. So stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'm here with my special guest, Lisa Salcedo. Lisa is a licensed clinical social worker. She's a psychotherapist in private practice in Palm Beach County. She got her degree, master's degree at Barry University here in South Florida, and she's been in private practice ever since with a short stint, I would say, at hospice, right? And you had some experience at hospice. I want to talk about that a little bit because it's so important as a social worker to have that experience in a hospice setting, because you're dealing with people that are at extreme loss, that are grieving, that are going through extreme emotions. What did you learn from your time at the hospice, and how does it help you today in private practice with your social work?
Oh gosh, so many things I learned. One of the things though that I think of first is being with clients who are in the midst of overwhelming emotions, right? It's very hard. Before I worked at hospice in the bereavement department, it was a little hard working with clients that were crying in front of you.
Yeah.
And
Because all you can do is give them a tissue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're not in therapy, you're not supposed to stop the client from expressing those kind of feelings. So you really have to sit and hold space for them. And that's one of the things I got really good at, and I love that. I actually love the work of working with bereaved people. And I worked with kids ages 5 to 18 and also young adults as well. And then I did a lot of groups with adults,
Right.
regular adults.
And caregivers that have been caring for someone with dementia, so you
Yes.
run the spectrum.
Yes.
But grief is grief,
Yeah.
and it's very difficult for people to, like you say, sit there and let someone express themselves, because we all want to come to their rescue. We all want to, oh, it's okay, don't worry, pat on the back, here's a tissue.
Right.
But you learn after you've done it for a while or been around it for a while that people do need to express themselves, and they do need that time to let it out and to vent and to just, to do whatever they need to do to process it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That you-
So, being that you were in this for some time and experienced it with a lot of people, is there a difference in grieving over a loss of something or maybe a job, as opposed to grieving over someone who had dementia, or even grieving over, maybe a healthy husband who had a car accident versus an older spouse who you cared for 10 years that had Alzheimer's. Is there a difference in that process, do you think?
So there's a lot of similarities. Grief is grief, like you were saying. There's lots of feelings that happen. There's sad, and it's not just anger or sadness. There's a myriad of feelings that one can feel when somebody actually loses a loved one, or even a job too, that kind of thing. When somebody is working with or grieving the loss of somebody who has had dementia, I think, let me just back up for just a second. When somebody has a loved one who has dementia, or really any kind of terminal illness, and that's not necessarily a terminal illness diagnosis, but there's something called anticipatory grief. So anticipatory grief begins when a diagnosis is given. So somebody with a diagnosis, say pancreatic cancer or even dementia, there's the beginnings of that anticipation of them passing away.
So you start grieving right after the diagnosis because you kind of know it's coming. Yes. So that could go on for years, literally.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I think is so difficult with caregiving a loved one that has dementia. You don't really know how long that grief or that is going to go on. I worked with a young girl in her 20s whose dad had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and she started grieving immediately because her dad was not her dad anymore. But he didn't pass until, I think, about 18 months afterwards. And so she had all that time to get all of the joyful memories and get some good stuff in there before he passed away, but he certainly wasn't her dad. And so she started grieving, and
yeah, because he acted so different.
Yeah, so different.
And you grieve the loss of that person's personality, of everything.
Yes.
They just don't act the same, right? So it's very, very difficult. And so, speaking of grief, are there specific things that anyone should do or can do if they're going through the grieving process? Because I've talked to a lot of people who have lost their spouse, and some seem to be able to move on quicker than others, and others hang on for years and years. And I'm curious, from your perspective, the reason for that, is it just because of the connection they had, or is it something to do with the way they process grief?
Sure. I wish it was that simple. Like I could just give you like a one line. It's because of this, Marcia. But it really is complicated, and everybody's grief journey is different. And that's what I think makes it so unique. Some things help one person but don't help another person. Some things that somebody says, oh, this was, the best thing that I ever did. It really helped my grief journey move forward. And somebody else might say, no, that doesn't work for me. That makes me feel worse. So it really is about finding what helps you, what nurtures your soul, what helps you feel the feelings. I definitely think feeling the feelings and being able to express those feelings or externalize those feelings is one way of really grieving in a healthier manner. If you're somebody who is not wanting to grieve, I mean, listen, nobody likes to feel bad.
Sad and angry and broken, and it's an awful feeling. But you do need to go through it, is what you're saying.
You do. It does take a certain amount of courage, though, I think. And that's why I think going to either an individual therapist, a bereavement counselor, or going to a bereavement group can be so helpful, because it does what? Again, it helps externalize those feelings, talking about those feelings, or expressing them in other ways. Art, you could do dance therapy, you could express them, in so many different ways, but definitely getting those feelings out, because they're appropriate feelings. When we lose somebody, it's important to be able to validate and normalize those feelings for yourself, but it's hard work. So again, our culture really doesn't really encourage people to express their feelings. Like, we expect that people are going to get over the loss of their loved one in just a few days and get back to work or get back to life as normal. That's not really how it happens.
Yeah.
But to be able to be kind to yourself and use self-compassion and be able to express those feelings is really important.
Well, I'm glad you said that because, because that is the perfect segue to the next thing I wanted to bring up. So, a big part of your practice is helping people through, you know, the guilt, the loss, but you also help people through stress, through difficult times in their life, through depression, through anxiety, and all of these emotions can be caused by hundreds of different things, right? I mean, we all have these things that happen to us. It's called life, and we feel these things. And one of the things that you say that you like to do and that you are good at doing is helping people through that so they can get to the other side, so they can feel maybe more joy in their life, so they can at least be content, right? And one of the ways that you help people is by something you call guilt-free self-care. And so you just mentioned a second ago about how to care for yourself, but you call it guilt-free self-care. So explain that.
Oh, sure. I would love to. I love that you picked up on that. It really is true, though. Most people, when they do self-care, they think of, you know, going to the spa or the salon or, you know, being selfish. Mm-hmm. And self-care is not selfish. Self-care helps you, and this is really important for caregivers, right? So this is a really nice segue to talk about caregivers. Self-care is you keeping yourself what?
Sane.
Exactly, in a word, yes, exactly, sane. And so it's about doing things for yourself. I mean, even things like hydrating and good nutrition and exercise, even just walking 20 minutes a day. All of these things are self-care, and yet a lot of caregivers will feel guilty for caring for themselves because it takes time away from the loved one that they're caring for. And they feel like, I can't go and get my nails done or my toes done or whatever, my hair done, or even just simple things, because it's going to take away time, and they don't have somebody that can sit with their loved one if need be,
right.
Or they don't know what their loved one is going to do when...
Or they're afraid to leave them,
Exactly.
right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So the idea is to make sure that we're caring for ourselves in a way that is self-nurturing, self-compassionate, and you feel, well, as little guilt as possible.
You know, it's funny, caregivers are amazing, right? Because
Amazing.
They are amazing. They do so much, they give so much, and yet, for some reason, they feel like it's not enough. Is that because they're self-sabotaging themselves, or is it because they're trying to be a martyr? Or, I mean, where does this guilt come from? Is it something that we learned growing up? How does someone, need to accept that, yes, I am doing good for my person, I am doing the right thing? How do they get over that hump not to feel the guilt so they can go out to lunch with a friend once a month or something like that?
Right. I think guilt is something so challenging to work on. You know, there's true guilt and there's false guilt. That's how I decided. True guilt is when you do something to somebody that hurts their feelings or something.
On purpose.
Yeah, on purpose. And so true guilt is you going to make amends, right, and apologize and all of that. False guilt is when we think we should be doing something that we may or may not be, or maybe we're doing something or we're not doing something. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to feel it, but it's guilt that we really shouldn't be feeling because it's not true.
Okay.
Right? And so I think a lot of times when we're caregiving for somebody, there's just always so much more to do. There's another phone call to make. There's another lunch to make.
But that's the same as a younger, healthy person going to work every day. You don't finish the job every single day and start over fresh. It's always something more to do. So they have to find a balance because, like, okay, this isn't going anywhere. It's going to be here on my desk tomorrow when I get back. So I'm just going to walk away from it, go home, be with my family, get a good night's sleep, come back the next day. So if people thought about that being a caregiver, that it's never going to go away, but you can't do it all even in 24 hours. You're never going to get it done because it's always going to be there. Maybe that would help with the mentality of, okay, I did what I could do today. It's going to be there tomorrow. I'll tackle tomorrow's problems tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be awesome.
It's a way to look at it, I think.
It's a great way to look at it. I also think that the caregivers, in my experience working with caregivers, they always want to do more, and they always think, oh, I need to go to the store, I need to make this other phone call, or I need to get this lined up. I think they're always thinking, maybe thinking ahead, and maybe even overthinking. And that's why I think it kind of gets in the way of doing things for yourself or just taking moments where you breathe. I also think there's a certain level of... Breathe. Take the deep breath. Just take the deep breath. You'll feel better.
Take the deep breath. It really does help, right?
It really does help. I could give you the science. There's science behind it. But I also think that when you're a caregiver, you may be living in a certain space of hypervigilance, right? And so you're always listening. Like, is my loved one, walking out the front door, or is my loved one, did my loved one fall down? Did my loved one, are they in the kitchen making something to eat? And I think it's very hard to relax when you're always kind of like this, like listening and straining to listen to what they're doing or what they're getting into.
That causes someone to feel anxiety, right? Because you never know, and you're always like on pins and needles.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And so sometimes they live in and we all do. I mean, I think when we're caregiving, maybe we're caregiving for children, right? Maybe we're caregiving for somebody who's ill, or somebody has a terminal illness or a dementia case. But I think it really is. It's like a chronic state of anxiety.
Yeah. And that'll wear you down.
Yes, and that's when people come to me, that's one of the things, when I hear clients talk about caregiving, my ears always perk up. I think, okay, I need to pay attention here, because caregivers do what? They pay more attention to their loved one than they do themselves. Not all the time, not everyone, not 24/7,
right.
But more than likely they're always caring.
Yeah.
And that's because they're wonderful people, of course. But I'm always watching for how can I help support my caregivers and help them think about themselves more, right?
Because if they're healthier physically, mentally, emotionally, they're going to be a better caregiver in the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
The old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, is so true. But again, it's hard to take those moments for yourself. I remember when I was working at hospice years ago, our caregiver groups rarely had anybody show up. Why? Because caregivers can't take any time off.
Because they're busy caregiving.
They're caregiving. So it was really hard. We had to figure out a way to help caregivers. And I honestly think the whole telehealth, like the pandemic, really brought in kind of a whole new way of looking at how we can support our caregivers. And I kind of love that, you know. It's like the Zoom way of doing things. Of course, I don't use Zoom. I use a confidential platform, or even though Zoom has them.
There's good that came out of bad, and so to speak, right? The silver lining of being a caregiver, you can't go out of your house to a support group, but you can still do it online in your home, and that became a really, really good way for caregivers to connect and not be so isolated. And a lot of them now that can go to a support group in person prefer to just do it the other way, the new way, because it works for them.
Yeah, it really does. It's so convenient. I have clients who say, I don't want to do, regular in-person therapy anymore because it's so convenient to do it via telehealth. And I kind of love that too, because now I'm not, I was saving, when I started doing telehealth in March of 2020, I started saving 6 hours a week, not traveling back and forth to my office.
See?
So
another blessing, right?
Another silver lining.
And I love those silver linings. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be giving away a free book. So when we come back, have a pencil and paper ready, because you'll want to take advantage of this free offer. So stay with us.
Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to memory care for people that are living with memory issues, Alzheimer's, or other related dementia. There are 58 Alzheimer's Arden Courts assisted livings located throughout the United States. They offer lots of support for the family caregiver, including support groups and lots of counseling and a lot of educational opportunities. And one of the things that they would like to offer to you today, just because you're either listening to this show on the iHeartRadio or you've tuned in to caregiversolutions.info website, is this free book. It's called Untangling Alzheimer's. It's written by Dr. Tam Cummings, and it's a wonderful book for family caregivers. It's absolutely free. I highly recommend that if you have not read this book, you get it as soon as possible, because it's going to help you on your caregiving journey. And so the way to get this free book is just for asking for it. All you have to do is send an email to Delray at arden-courts.com. So it's Delray, D-E-L-R-A-Y, at arden-courts.com. Give them your name, your address, your telephone number, and tell them that you saw this free offer for the Untangling Alzheimer's book on the Caregiver Solutions Info Show, and they'll be happy to get it in the mail directly to you. We started offering this book last week. We had an overwhelming response, so it might take a little bit longer than usual to get it to you, but it will get there. It has been back ordered, and it's a great book. So get yours today, and don't delay, because you want to get yours as soon as we get the new shipment. So today my special guest is Lisa Salcedo, and Lisa is a licensed clinical social worker. She's also a psychotherapist in private practice here in Palm Beach County, Florida. And she has been talking to us about helping caregivers through all kinds of emotions, through grief, through loss, helping them on their way, helpfully not to feel guilty about their caregiving, and all kinds of emotions. And we talk about how, Lisa, that is so important for someone not to do this alone, right?
Yes.
Because it is something, once a doctor told me that it takes a minimum of 6 people to take care of one person, because here you've got someone to cook, to clean, to entertain, to chauffeur, to take care of the bills for that part. I mean, and here a caregiver, a spouse, let's say, is trying to do it all on their own. So you can do it on your own, but at the detriment of maybe yourself getting down, getting overwhelmed, getting sick. And that is a statistic that over 60% of caregivers who don't take care of themselves properly while they're caregiving kind of get out of commission, get down and out, even sometimes pass away from the stress of caregiving. So it is a real thing, right?
It is a real thing.
It is a real thing. And so it's so important for caregivers to understand that. I'm so glad that you're here to talk about this today. So in the top of the show, we talked about sand therapy and what that meant and how that worked. But there's a lot of other types of therapy that you utilize in your practice to help people in different circumstances. So I was wondering if we could talk about a few of those and what they're called and what they mean and how they work and who best would be suited for that type of therapy. So I know one of them is cognitive behavior therapy. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Sure, but I'm stunned a little bit about what you said, that the doctor said that it takes 6 people to caregive for one person. That's mind-blowing, right?
Well, if you think about
Yes.
everything that a person does, and you're taking on, all this extra, if you want to really take care of yourself too, you need help.
Yes.
And basically what he was saying was, you need your team. You got to have
Exactly.
your team, get your team on board,
Yes.
the doctors and, your support group and, the team that's going to help you with your respite care and your education and all of that. So, if you think about it, it's not easy doing it alone, and people that have tried have literally ended up in the hospital, because I've had to go to the hospital more than once to have a spouse sign on the dotted line to help their loved one, because they were in the hospital and now their loved one didn't have a caregiver.
Wow.
So, I never want to see that again, but I have experienced it.
Yes.
So it is true, and it is real. It's a real thing. Caregiver burnout, caregiver stress.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so talk about some of the other ways that you do therapy to help people.
Sure. Oh, so many different so many different therapies, honestly. I mean, there's so many things. Like when I was writing down the list and reading it, I thought, that's a lot of therapies, but there's a lot of things I don't do. So that's helpul to know as well. But cognitive behavior.
Not everybody can do everything.
Yeah, and-
you're amazing the way you are.
They always talk about, you have to have your niche, and I do have my niche,
Yes.
and I'm happy to work within that, and that's awesome. But cognitive behavior therapy is something that I think many people know about, and it's really an excellent therapy for so many different things. Cognitive therapy relies more on like the thinking, like how our thoughts influence our feelings and our behavior. And it kind of sometimes can be like how our behavior influences our thoughts and our feelings. So they're all, it's kind of like a triad, like a triangle, right? And it can go every different way. Like you can have a behavior, something that you do can make you feel a certain way and make you think a certain way. So sometimes people have what we call cognitive distortions. And we believe cognitive distortions. Something, for example, like, I'm a failure. Right? And people will begin to think I'm a failure because maybe they have failed several exams at school, and then after a while they start to think, wow, I'm a failure. And so a cognitive behavior therapy starts to help you reframe those cognitive distortions, those lies essentially, untruths, into a positive. So for example, if somebody comes to me and they're thinking, wow, I am just the biggest failure ever. And so we talk a little bit about what did they fail? And then getting back to like a way to reframe that belief in ourselves to saying like, well, I might have failed at that test, but exactly, but I'm not a failure overall.
But I can also do better.
I can do better.
I
Yep.
can raise the score. I can, in things I can do,
Yeah.
change your behavior to
Yes.
change your thinking.
Yes,
Sort of.
It's all related. Isn't that funny? I mean, it really is all related. And so, somebody who comes to me who has difficulty like making friends, because maybe they're like a negative Nelly, or maybe they just always come out first with the negative, or with pessimism. So we can talk a little
I
bit
know
about
people like that.
I think there's a
How
lot
do I help them?
there's a way just to reframe, to understand where that person's coming from, like really dig deep into maybe it was the way they were raised as a child, and they again develop this way of thinking, and maybe just with a little bit of a shift, like a paradigm shift, we can make things, they can be a little bit more positive in life. Not toxic positivity, but just a little bit more positive, and shift their life and become a little happier.
And so you can do that with caregivers too. Whatever they're feeling,
Yes.
that they're not doing well, or whatever untruth that they're telling themselves, the way they see it.
Well, exactly, because a lot of caregivers think they have to do everything by themselves,
Yeah.
right? And for some reason, they have to do that. I don't know. It's because maybe they, their parents modeled, that they really have to be a good caregiver, or they were a caregiver to their grandmother when they were a teenager, and so.
Or I've had cases where caregivers think nobody can do it as good as they can.
Yes.
Right? So I'm the
Yeah.
only one that knows how to take care of my husband, and nobody else could step in my shoes and do it. And in a way, they're sort of right because they are the only ones that can do it that way, right? But it doesn't mean nobody else can do it. They might do
Exactly.
it differently,
Yes.
but it'll still get done.
Exactly. I'm sure they're absolutely right. There is nobody probably better than them to do something. But does it have to be done to that extent and be
Right.
that perfect, or can it be just average and,
Right.
and get the job done?
Right. Can it be a different day or a different time or a different way? And help people to look at options, right? Instead of being just like so straight-laced about and adamant about things, because trying to stick to a schedule is very hard for
Yes,
caregivers. And I
yes.
always tell them, go with the flow, because what you plan today might, for this morning, it's going to be totally different, and it changes on a dime. So
Yes.
you have to be ready to go to plan B, C, D, right?
Especially, I think, with patients who have dementia, right? Really, every day is not like the other.
No.
Yesterday might be very different from today. And so you do have to, I think, be a little bit more flexible and less rigid and get some help from somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. I don't think that we should be caregiving alone. We definitely need a team. I do think it takes a village in a lot of ways to caregive for people. One of my clients, when we were talking about self-care one day, said to me, and this was a young girl in her 20s, she said, when I'm doing good self-care, I'm doing something all day long. So if you think about, and I said, yeah, I mean, because you're always making sure you're eating right and hydrating enough and doing, you're exercising and taking breaks. Or imagine then taking care of not only yourself but one additional whole person. That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Getting help,
It's almost like having, it's like a newborn baby. I mean, it's
Yeah.
constant, right?
Yeah.
So another one, I want to talk about another way that you help people through therapy. You have something called expressive arts.
Okay.
What's that all about?
So expressive arts is basically like art therapy for those of us who are not registered art therapists. We call it expressive arts or expressive therapy.
So you just doodle yourself until you doodle it all out of you,
Yeah,
right?
you doodle out your emotions.
Yeah, I could do that.
It really encompasses anything. I mean, expressive arts can be journaling. It can be creating something with clay. It can be painting. It can be drawing. It can be just taking finger paints. It really can be making jewelry. Anything that I feel, anything that you use, anything like crafting in a way can help you express feelings, I think, if we do it properly.
Okay.
We can journal our feelings out. All of that is considered expressive arts. We can collage our feelings out. One of the groups that I do, we just made collages. We made collages of, and it was a group of seniors. We made collages. We cut out pictures of magazines of all things that gave us, pictures of good memories and things that we love. And so that was a really nice intervention for this group of aging patients that I work with to feel good, to connect with really good memories or things that they really love. One client of mine, I don't know how he found so many pictures of cats. There was like 4 or 5 pictures of cats. He really loves
He
cats,
loved cats.
and that made him feel happy.
So whatever makes you happy. And then you have your collage that you can put up and look at it all the time, and it brings you good feelings.
Yes, it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
So I also have another activity that I used to do pretty much with every client. I had either a heart, the outline of a heart, or the outline of a feeling of a jug, like a bottle, a big bottle. And I would ask my
Wine
client,
bottle? Is that therapy?
Okay, well, that might be therapy.
For some people, it might
Yes, we could make that therapy.
Yeah, we could.
And basically, it was a way to help them identify what feelings are in their heart. Right? And then they would color in the heart or the jug with how big that feeling was. So, sometimes people would say, oh, I'm feeling really sad and I'm feeling really happy at the same time. So, they'd make a heart that was half and half, half happy and half sad. So that again helps people identify feelings and also be able to, because once you have identified your feelings, which is hard sometimes, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes feelings can,
Well,
meld together.
Yeah, and feelings, can, like you said, come from sometimes your thoughts. So whatever you're thinking and you're feeling, and then you act on it, and you have to figure out what you're feeling before you can
Yeah.
deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just think, if you're feeling sort of uncomfortable, you might not know exactly, using any of the feeling words, but you're feeling uncomfortable. And so you have to make yourself feel better in a way. So
Right.
it's hard to identify feelings sometimes, because again, sometimes they can all be together, all together in a ball.
But you're good at helping
Yes.
people identify those. You have something that you say, and I like this because it's an old saying, but you put a little twist on it. And I read this on your bio. I want to talk about it for a minute because we don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately, because this has been such a great conversation. You say what you mean what you say, but don't be mean when you say it. Did I say it right?
Yeah, exactly. So many people know that saying, say what you mean and mean what you say. Everybody says that,
Right.
right? But most people don't know there's a third line that says, don't say it mean.
Don't be mean when you say it.
That's right. So it's just, I did a lot of work during the pandemic with communication with couples. Obviously, we were all stuck with our partners, right? We couldn't
Everybody
go
having
out.
cabin fever and getting on each other's nerves. But that
Yes.
happened with caregivers and the person they're caring for. They're
Yes.
stuck together. They can't go out. They were together 24/7, and they got on each other's nerves. And we
Yes.
talked one time about, hey, you need a break, even if it's going in the other room and having somebody else, watch them, because you can burn out from this too much togetherness, right?
Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think when people get frustrated and when you have caregivers, frustration and, irritation and annoyance, I think it's just part of the whole thing, right? There's things that you do that you have to do over and over again. And it is nice to be able to say what you mean, be direct, be assertive, not passive and not aggressive, right? No yelling, right? But sometimes people yell because they're overwhelmed. But the idea is to say what you mean and mean what you say, and say it kindly.
Yeah.
I think kindness really matters. I know that's kind of a cliche, kindness matters, but I think understanding really matters. And I think when people seek first to understand each other and be kind, then I think it's so much better, because people then get more of what they want.
Yeah.
If you say, oh, I'm just so frustrated with, it's okay to say you're frustrated, but say it in a kind way and use I statements and say, I'm feeling frustrated when you're doing this. Let's see if we can do this differently. But when we try to communicate and really try to communicate like we want things to change, it's best to be kind and understanding as well, and don't say it mean.
And that reminds me of the caregivers who, really, no fault of their own, they're caregiving for a spouse. They've been married 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
They have a certain way that they interact with each other. And now because of some dementia and memory loss and all the weird, strange behaviors that go with that, this person is not that person anymore, right? And so now the interaction really has changed, and it's frustrating for the caregiver, because this person has changed and now they need to change their way toward them rather than vice versa,
Yes.
because that person can never go back the way they were because of the damage to the brain, right? And so it's really frustrating, and so they forget, and they do yell, and they do get frustrated. And one of the things that caregivers, I can't help it, I just get so frustrated and I yell.
Yes.
And I think this is a common occurrence with a lot of caregivers. So what would you say to somebody that came to you and said, I can't help it, I'm so frustrated, I just yell, what can I do?
Yeah. So first I tell them a little story and ask a little question. When you're in the midst of an argument with your partner and the phone rings and you pick up the phone to answer it, are you going to be like, "Rrr," right? No, you're not going to be like that. You're going to be like, hello. So you can do it differently. You can manage those feelings. And that's kind of silly, but everybody does it like that, right? The other thing I think is really important is to say something before you're already at a 10, right? Like if you're irritated or upset and you're at a 1 or a 2,
Right.
you're more likely to be able to be kind. And listen, I don't mean be sappy kind. I just
but
mean,
it might diffuse everything.
exactly.
Yeah.
But if you're saying something to somebody and you're already at a 10, you're going to be just exploding.
Yeah.
And so, but it's a habit. Like it's that mindful pause.
Yeah.
Right. It's like bringing
Yeah,
mindfulness.
count to 10 first before you say anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take a breath
Yeah.
before
Let's do it
you
again.
respond.
It's really good to breathe.
It is, because in that moment, at that mindful pause, you can make a decision. Am I going to react the way I always do?
Yeah.
Or the way I often do?
But I have a choice.
Yes.
I do have a choice.
But it's hard. You have to practice it.
It is hard.
for
That's
sure.
why they need to come see
Yeah.
you. So if someone does want to come see you or they
Yes.
want to talk to you, how can they do that?
So I'm all over, like I have a website.
Tell us what everything is.
Sure, Lisa Salcedo, and it's actually up on the screen, lisasalcedolcsw.com. That's my website.
Okay.
I'm on Psychology Today. You can search for me, Lisa Salcedo. I'm in Lake Worth, Florida. You can search and get that contact information through there, or my phone number, 561-801-7577. Give me a call or send me an email, and I will respond.
Awesome. Okay, so this is so great. Lisa is so great. And if you're a caregiver and you've learned something today or you need help with something, go ahead and give Lisa Salcedo a call, 561-801-7577, and she'll,
got it.
I'm sure, be able to help you.
You got
Thank
it.
you so much for being here today. Our time, unfortunately, is up, and I would just love to have you come back and talk to us again sometime.
I would love to anytime. Thank you for having me. It's
Thank
been
you.
wonderful, Marcia.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you.
And thank you all for tuning in today to caregiversolutions.info. I hope you'll come back next week, every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 Eastern Time. We're also on the iHeartRadio. You can search that under WNN. And this is great for caregivers. So tell somebody that you know that needs a little bit of encouragement, needs a little bit of support. We'll be here to help them. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Don't forget to get your book if you're interested in untangling Alzheimer's, and send that email to delray@arden-courts.com to get your free book. Until next time, be good, be safe, stay well. I'll see you then.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver